I don't need to wait for the whole countdown. Let's do it. Hello, good morning. I I forgot to start the countdown, but it's 11:20 and we need to get started, so I'm going to do that. So good morning, hello. Thanks for saying good morning already in the chat. Still just getting some things switched over and turned on here. Let me get to my slides page and hide that for now. Yeah, that'll work. And oops, let me fade that over. Okay, didn't realize I could do it that way, but that's cool. Okay, anyway, you can't see what I'm doing, obviously. I'm fiddling around with things. I've got a much more elaborate setup than normal today, so I'm kind of excited to be using it. I've got my two monitors. This is my sort of command center station setup, and I'm actually going to need it today because I have a lot of things like running in the background that I want to pull into view and show you today. But they're already running, and I have multiple windows. That's a big thump. Bigger than usual. Hope everyone's okay upstairs. Yeah, it's a rainy morning, but you know, it's okay. It's early spring, I think. I think we can call it that now. We've got things are starting to grow. Have not seen any daffodils blooming yet. That's usually a good early sign. But I've got one in my front yard that looks like it's about to go. I haven't checked it yet this morning, but I'm eager to. I don't have the bird cam on because it's really got a lot of condensation in it. Let me just check it again. Yeah, it looks pretty bad today. It needs to dry out. Or yeah, maybe I just need to get a better kind of waterproofing encapsulation for it. It's not designed to be outdoors, like this particular webcam, so that's why. So if I see a bird, I can switch it on, I guess, and we can look at a blurry bird if we need to. So today, here's the plan. I want to show you some hypertext works, and I'm going to do that today instead of kind of working through the reading, because the setup that I have for today, like me sending you all video, works better for this. In other words, I've already got some things figured out and that I can show you here that I would have a hard time doing on Wednesday, so it's better for me to do it today. You have read the first part of Chapter 3 by Scott Redberg, Scott Redberg's book, electronic literature book, where he gives you some of the background on hypertext in the context of literature, or literary fiction, I guess, specifically modernism and postmodernism. And then he also talks about the technological context for hypertext. And one of those contexts that you are no doubt familiar with is just the way that hypertext works on the web. And that's something you've experienced today. I mean, it's something you experience all the time. When you click on a link, you're using hypertext. Hypertext is the H and the T in HTML, and also the H and the T in HTTPS, which is something, or HTTP, which you see whenever you type in a URL and you start at the beginning. So these are things that you are familiar with, but in the literary context, there's actually a different sort of parallel path for hypertext that predates the web. And I wanted to show you some of that software today so that you can appreciate it and understand how it's different than the hypertext that you're used to. And also, as you get to reading about some of these examples in the textbook, you will understand them a little bit better if you've seen them demonstrated. At least that's my intention for today. So I'm going to be traversing several works, and traversal is a term of art in hypertext. Like instead of, you might say, I'm not just reading it, but I'm also clicking and I'm navigating. So traverse is a verb that that captures many of the different kinds of activities that you do with a hypertext work. So not just reading, but I'm going to be traversing these, but essentially demoing them. By demoing them, I think the downside of me just demoing them is that it kind of emphasizes their structure as opposed to their content. Like I'm going to be showing you different kinds of interfaces and working through them, and I really won't have a lot of time to get into the content, but I'm going to try to give you some samples and try to give you some sense of these different works in terms of their writing and their storytelling. But we'll see what I have time to do. I have several kind of queued up here that I can show you, but we will see how it goes. So I'm not going to show this slideshow because it's not much to it, but I guess I could. But just a content warning, I'm going to be showing you several of these works, and these are hypertext works, meaning I won't experience all of the works. I won't have nearly enough time to traverse all of them in their entirety. But even the idea of traversing an entirety, hypertext work in its entirety is often a challenge. I'm not planning on looking at particularly violent events in these, but some of these do contain events that are violent, and so I'm just kind of giving you this generic content warning. There is one that features a car accident where someone is killed. Actually, two feature car accidents where someone is killed. There's also some works that imply sexual violence, but it's not at least I don't think, depicted graphically or described graphically. I say I don't think because I didn't see it, and kind of looking at it this morning, things were implied to have happened off stage. But I don't plan on looking for them. Other than that, I'm just wanting you to know that it might come up, and that's all I guess I can say. These are possibilities because navigating a hypertext work is essentially unpredictable, in the sense that I don't know these works well enough to find exactly what I'm looking for or to avoid certain things. So I'm just going to be exploring these and traversing them, and we may come across some things. So these are the works I'm going to be demoing today. Most of these use a platform called Storyspace, which should be, I guess it's mentioned in the first part of chapter 3, but certainly it's mentioned a lot in the chapter. Well, anyway, we'll look at it later. We'll talk about it on Wednesday, actually. But the Storyspace is the software developed by Eastgate Systems, or is sold now by Eastgate Systems. And the idea is that whenever, and they still publish these, but not often anymore. But when we're looking at these hypertext works, the idea is like you would buy these like you would buy a book, and it would come in the mail, and you would get something like this, and inside there's a floppy disk, and you put the floppy disk into your computer, and then you experience the work in the way that I'm going to show you. I've already preloaded all these, but I do have the physical media for the ones I'm going to be showing you today. This is Samplers by Dina Larson. And as I demonstrate these, I would like to request something. If you take a look at the Google Doc, I've added a heading for today already, from Monday, March 1st, and I've suggested some things that would be worth knowing about each of these works that I'm going to demo. So there's plenty of you watching right now. It would be helpful if one or two of you would add some notes to this as I demonstrate these. Author, year, publication, and platform, I think, are pretty straightforward and easy to kind of document. But if you can describe them a little bit too, that would be great. Especially if you see a key quote, or if you see me kind of talk about a key quote, that would be useful to add here as well. Just an idea, building more material for the quiz, and I see you all jumping on the document, so thank you for doing that, whoever that is. So I'm going to be talking about these today. Also want to mention some homework. So we're going to continue exploring hypertext on Wednesday, obviously. It's an even week, so I'll be meeting with the even cohorts. I think, right? Is this week 6? I think this is week 6. And so we're going to talk about 12 Blue. You read My Body a Wonder Camera over the weekend, hopefully. And so on Wednesday, we will be discussing it along with 12 Blue by Michael Joyce. And some of that may be a bit of comparison and contrast because they are two works published around the same time by two different authors who had worked with Storyspace in the past but are now working with the web in these two works. And so there's a lot of things they have in common, but they're also very different. This is 12 Blue, and it's zoomed in a lot, but that's okay. Let me just show you how this work works. You start by clicking on any of these images, or you can click on one of these numbers. They essentially correspond to columns in this image. And as you look at it, you read passages like this. It's blue on blue, so you can click on links that you see here when they're underlined, or you can click on links on the left. These like sort of dotted looking lines are also links that you can click on to get to different passages. And if you kind of hover over it as you move, like I have Chrome, and so whenever I hover over a link, I can see the URL, and that kind of gives you a sense of where the links are. They don't actually highlight or anything as you hover over them, but you can see that they are going different places. It's called an image map. So this link is blue. You can click on it and you go somewhere else. After you've been to a page, let me go back so you can see this. Once you've already clicked on a link, it's considered a visited link. And so the way he's coded this is that visited links they are the same color as the background. So effectively they disappear. They're still there. Like if you go like that, you can still see them, but they are the same color as the background. So they're kind of hidden. And that's kind of a clue. If you remember from penetration, how the links changed colors as you explored the work further, that kind of gives you a sense of where you've been already in this work, which is helpful, but this work does involve just a lot of clicking around and exploring. It does take some time. There's some questions that I would recommend you keep in mind, or really just two strategies as you think through this work. Be patient with it. It is a confusing work, not just the linking structure, but just the narrative of it is going to move in a lot of directions, and it's going to be hard to get oriented in it for a while. But you will. If you stick with it, you will. It does make sense ultimately. To help you make sense of that, I recommend keeping track of the characters' names, like literally write them down. And as you figure out who's related to who, make a note of that, because there are certain characters that go by multiple names. There are some characters that are married at one point and later they're not. There are different people in the same places, but at different times. And so place names are also important to keep track of. Very often a passage will not include any proper names. It'll just include pronouns. And so you have to do some work sometimes to figure out who's being talked about. So in this case, this is one actually. It looks like, I don't see any proper names here. But you've got she. She looked at life through a blue glass, looking down into its watery, wonderful depths, holding her breath. So who that is kind of depends on how you got to this passage, right? At this particular moment, I just dropped right into this passage, so I don't know. But if I found a different link that gave me some context, or by learning more about the characters, if I understand who would be looking down through a blue glass, is there a biologist who studies marine biology, that would kind of tell me who the she is in this particular passage. And I just gave you a big clue, right? There is a character who's a marine biologist. So that's, yeah, there you go. If you do find yourself stuck, let me see if I can get to it. There's a pretty common place that you feel like you got to the end. See if I'm just blasting through this pretty quickly. I think I'm almost there. Actually, you know what? This is actually the. Okay. This is actually no. You know what? This is a special part of this work. I'm going to get out of this. It's actually a loop you can't get out of. Let me see if I can find it. There's a lot to this work. Okay, I'm trying to get to the ending. There's not an ending. It's a hypertext work, so it doesn't really end. I can't find it. So, but there's a point sometimes you feel like you keep getting back to the same image. There's actually an image in here. There's a couple images. There's one in particular. It looks like a marshy pond. And once you get to that, you might think, oh, there's nothing else to do. But you can always try the different passages on the left. These will always kind of jump you back somewhere in the story, and that usually helps. So here we've got a few character names on this page. Kind of interesting. So as you think about this work, again, keep track of the names. It might be useful to draw a family tree kind of structure. And if you find that helpful, definitely add that to the Google Doc. Another question to ask yourself as you read is, what happens to Ed Stanko? And Ed Stanko is a character's name in this work. And he does not survive. Spoiler alert, I guess. But what happens to him? Who kills him? That's a question. Now, this is not really a mystery story. It's not that's the big thing everyone's trying to figure out. But it is something that happens in the story, and you have to read pretty deeply into it to get to that point and understand it. So that's kind of my challenge to you, to try to get to that. And that's if you figured out who has killed Ed Stanko, you've probably read most of the passages in this work, or you got really lucky and jumped straight to it. But if you have not seen that yet, you should probably keep exploring. How long that takes, it might be 30 minutes, it might be 2 hours. It really depends on your choices and your patience, but I think it's definitely in there, and there's definitely an answer to that question. So see if you can figure it out. Please don't add that to the notes though, because I want you all to figure that out yourselves, or get to that point yourselves, because that's kind of your challenge for reading it. Okay, so that's 12 Blue. It does involve some violence, I should say. In terms of the content warning. Well, obviously there is violence in Ed Stanko being killed. That verb kind of gives that away. There's also some drowning. So, yeah. But otherwise, mostly about families and relationships. Okay, so, one more announcement thing. I did make a change in Zapier. I remember I talked to some of you all about this. Zapier is what posts from the Discord memes channel to the Twitter page. And it kept giving us errors because it thought two different messages were the same, because they had the same file name. And if you create an image from a meme generator, it's probably going to save to your computer as image0.jpg. And so I think that's why it was failing. I'm not totally sure though. So I made a change to the Zapier script, the thing that Zapier does. And it's supposed to now include the text that you post along with your image. So we'll see how that goes, but please do not just write HW3/1 or something like that. Both because that won't make any sense on Twitter, and because if all of you do that, it'll just replicate the same problem where Twitter will think it's the same tweet again, and it'll reject that, and then the Zapier connection will break. So make some kind of descriptive caption, or a further layer to the joke, or just some kind of reference to it, right? Don't reference homework. Don't call it homework at all. Just say, here's a meme about 12 Blue, or whatever you think. But just make it something that's descriptive instead of just noting that you did the homework. Okay, so I'll send an announcement with those updated instructions later if I think of it. Cool, so let's take a look at some hypertext. So let's switch off my Chrome view here. And what I've got is two old computers running on my new computer. But I need to shut some things down here first. This is one I'm going to start up here in a second. But first, this is a Macintosh computer, a Mac running OS 9, and it's emulated here on my computer, my Windows computer. And currently, what I'm viewing are two works that are included with the Eastgate Quarterly Review of Hypertext. This is published in 1994, I think. 93. Well, the compilation was published in 94, but these two works individually were published in 93. Two works. These are Lust by Mary Kim Arnold and I Have Said Nothing by J. Yellow Lees Douglas. I have a anecdote. I know Jane Douglas. I know her pretty well. I have some anecdotes about her. She was my MA advisor, but I'll tell you about that later if you're interested. Not a big deal. But I worked with her when I was in graduate school. So I want to take a look at Lust first because it's a bit more straightforward. And what I'm going to be doing, again, is demonstrating the StorySpace hypertext reader. So this is StorySpace, and StorySpace gives the authors of these works several different options, and you'll see different options in these two works. And so I'm going to explain some of those options as I read these works and show you how you would work with these. So we open it like this, and bear in mind, this is really, this is 1993, 94. The web existed, but very few people were on it at this point. And so what we take for granted as far as accessing hypertext was not the case. It was not a thing. People might have been familiar with HyperCard, which was a different hypertext technology, which we can, I don't have an emulator for it right now, but I can show you that eventually. But StorySpace would have been a standalone kind of bespoke hypertext solution, and it works pretty well like this. So we'll start a new reading for Lust. You can see the loader as it loads here. And this one is, let me see if I can bring this down here. Can I click on, there's a little top of the window here. I can't quite get to it. Where is it? There's a way to, I got it earlier. If I can grab the top edge of this window, I can move it down into view, but I cannot quite grab it. Oh, there it is. I got it. Okay. So this is the text, and these are, what we'll see in the text part are different passages, and then you can see this little thing I'm dragging around. This is a way of interacting with the text. Sometimes it will pose a question, and if it's a yes or no question, I can click Y or N for that. So I can also type a word in here, and it would do that as well. So I don't know, there's a lot to this. So let me read, this is the prologue, kind of a poem. Nearly naked this summer night, sweet and heavy, he comes to her. This night she follows him, sweat between them. They speak of the child and the summer sun with words that yield to the touch. So there's certainly an erotic context to this work. The title Lust kind of gives that away. And so when you look at a phrase right here, words that yield to the touch, that has that kind of erotic context. But it also literally describes what we're doing as we experience this work, which is some of these words do yield to the touch. So if you click on some of these words, they take you somewhere else. And a big difference that you might have noticed just there is that there are quite a few links on this page, but unlike hypertext as we experience it today, these links are not marked differently. They don't look different. As we click, we can click anywhere on this page on any word and it'll take us somewhere. It's just that certain words will take us special places and all the other words will take us to some default next page. We can always get to the default next page by hitting, I think, enter. Maybe not in this one. But that's, if we look at this little table of contents thing, these are all of the links that are available from this page, which is a lot, basically most of them. This work as a whole is fairly short, and so this is, I think, all of the passages. I think they all are connected to the prologue passage. But you can click on those this way and go through it that way. One thing you'll notice if you click on this again, if I click on this again, is that the links have a name, so they have a destination, like a place we're going to, but the link has a name that the link is named. We can't see the name anywhere, but it's known, and you can view it this way if you pull it up this way. It also has what's called a guard field, and a guard field is the part of the screen that you would click on, and usually that's a word, but it's not always a word. Sometimes it is. So he remembers wishing he had stayed. He walks out of the room. She does not follow this night. He tries to speak to the child. He tries to remember how it happened. He tries to remember her face, her flesh. He remembers the tearing. He remembers the blood. He remembers the child. She had fallen to her knees. He walks out of the room that night. She follows him. This night she follows him home. She cries like a child. Dave. Dave was a guy's guy. He hung with the boys. He wore a baseball cap, only touched her when they were in bed. He called her dude and told her that she didn't understand penis things. Let's do. So I chose the word dude. I was interested in it. That doesn't necessarily mean that that was a word that the author of this programmed to be an active link specifically. It may have been. But yeah, we can't actually see. She's actually hidden that. So we can't see which of the words here are the actual guard fields. Wishing. She wishes he had stayed with her. She wishes like a child that he had followed her and stayed that night. The morning comes, summer sun, heavy, falling across the carpet fibers. She is on her knees facing the child. The child aches. The child comes to her nearly naked. She speaks slowly, deliberately. She aches. So there's a lot of repetition in this work where you start to feel like you've already seen a passage, even if you haven't. There's lots of recurring phrases and images in it. Some of them are violent, I think. Some of them have to do with birth. And kind of it's an accumulation of these images as you kind of work your way through this work. I think of this as more of a poem than a narrative. I think there is a story implied here, but it's actually many different stories. And I don't think you need to understand who did what to whom in order to appreciate the value of this work. I think you can kind of spend some time with it and get a feeling from it. And that's like what happens with poetry, I think. Poetry often is that way, where you spend some time with it, you get a feeling of it, and then that's it, you know. This work is, again, also pretty short. There are several named people, men's names, that seem to be here. But yeah, I don't have time for the whole exploration, but that's it, right? You can also go back and forward, and basically a pretty simple, as I said, version of Story Space. I Have Said Nothing by J. Yellow Lees Douglas is much more elaborate. Well, it uses a different version. Actually, it's not that much more complicated. I think it's just a bit longer. But the major difference that it does is that in addition to the kind of reading screen where we can see lexia, individual pages here, like where it says I've said nothing, this is the title page, we can also see this view, and I'll make this one bigger so you can see it better, if I can. I don't want to make it too big. But these are all of the passages, the lexia that comprise this work. And you can see them laid out here. This looks, you may recognize this kind of view. It might look a little similar to the Twine editor. But yeah, so one of the differences though, as you can see, is you can switch between these different ways of seeing these passages organized. You can actually move these around too if that's helpful, like if you want to kind of look at a particular thing. As you click on a title, you can't see it because this window is hidden now, it'll switch to that particular lexia, that passage, as you click on it. It's just kind of hidden. It's a lot to keep track of in terms of windows, so that's why it's helpful to have a slightly larger monitor as I do here. And it's hard to look at both of these views at once. I think it's a bit easier actually to kind of look at it kind of text by text and work your way through it. Let's see if I can I start over again? How do we get back to the beginning? Yeah, finding your way around in these things is often the challenge. Actually, let's start here. Okay. Yeah, we'll start here. For a long time afterwards, whenever you two don't quite meet up on the phone, he can't seem to get the narrative order of events quite right. He keeps shuffling it around until you realize neither of you know what it was anymore. One day he tells you that Jewel berated the EMS guys all the way to the UCLA Medical Center. There doesn't seem to be any point in reminding him that yesterday he told you the police broke all the gory details to him about 7 or 8 hours after the accident, or that the day before he said they'd both been drinking. What he says is this. No, neither of these are Twine, Bobby. These are Story Space. These were both created about 15 years before Twine existed. So Twine comes much later. I mentioned Twine because if you've seen Twine before, you might recognize some elements from this. Twine uses a similar visual structure to create its passages, that a structure similar to this. But I just mentioned that because it might be familiar. It's kind of really dark outside. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so what he says is this. Do you remember old Drew in Deliverance, he says to you? Sherry and I used to think it was real gross the way that John Voight kissed Drew before he pushed the body under, kissing a dead guy like that. You don't need to answer him, just let him keep going. Man, that's what I did. In the morgue, I kissed her everywhere. Okay, this one's pretty gross. Sorry, I'm going to move on. This is a work that is pretty violent. and I'll go ahead and give you sort of an explanation of it. If you look at it this way, and I wish you could zoom out on this, it's really just, you kind of have to stick with this particular size. All of these strands, as you can kind of see, these lines of passages, right? So here's one called nada, and then you can move forward using this arrow key, and you'll see which one gets highlighted next. So it will show the one that's, so later that afternoon, that's the passage that's currently selected, and if I click back, it goes up. If I go right, it goes down. Basically, it's following the default link if I go that way, and that's one way to experience this work. But that basically will move you up and down these kind of tentacles, and it sort of looks like an hourglass shape, but in the middle there is a car accident. So you can click here essentially and kind of see what's happening, but there is a pedestrian who's struck by a car and dies, and different characters deal with that and understand the event differently. And you see that those differences played out on the different like arms of this octopus as we experience it. So one is more kind of the anatomical descriptions of what happened. Some of these are like the ex-boyfriend, some of these are the current boyfriend, and all of these kind of center around this. And I think this actually gets to an explanation of what is different about hypertext fiction and why it's written this way, which is that many of these works that I'm looking at actually, that I've shown you already, deal with trauma in some way, or they deal with a traumatic event and different characters relating to it. And let's see if I can even find it again. But I won't be able to find it again. But one of those passages that I started with earlier on said something to the effect of he keeps getting things out of order. He can't make sense of things in kind of what order they happened in. And that's a common experience that people report relating to trauma, and when they're suffering from PTSD. Some of the symptoms of PTSD can be intrusive thoughts and also disorientation in terms of time and like where and when we are right now, and also events that are kind of the source of the trauma can get kind of mixed up and muddled. And I think hypertext is a way of representing that. So hypertext presents things in kind of a mixed up, muddled kind of way. And so I think that that's a reason why authors using hypertext or choose hypertext to tell stories about trauma and pain, and it kind of works for them. I mean, it's something that I think really does work in this story. It's a fairly short story. It is pretty gruesome sometimes, I should say. There was one passage that as I said, I kind of clicked through quickly because it's pretty gross. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. So you can see the names of the links, by the way. They can kind of float around here. It looks pretty messy as an interface, but that's again part of the car crash mentality of this particular work. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the Mac here. I guess I'll just leave it running, but I can just hide it for a second, and I'm going to switch over to another computer to show you some more works. So this is Windows 98, and this is something called Califia, but I would like to show you some other things first. Let me close Califia, and I'm going to first show you a work called Samplers by Dina Larson. So it's here it is. So this is on a Windows computer, but using the Windows version of StorySpace, and this is this work right here, and it's by Dina Larson. I'm sorry, it's mirror imaged, but you can see her title there. Dina Larson is a hypertext author and most well known for a work called Marble Springs, and it's a massive kind of novel length epic work that she's still, I think she's still adding to actually. But this is samplers, and these are done in StorySpace. And so we can see a couple of different features of StorySpace using her work. And I really like her work. I wish I had more time to spend with it, but I'll just click on some of it to show you. The operating conceit here is quilt patterns. And so she's got several different stories organized around different kinds of quilt patterns, and they are both like thematically and well, conceptually related to those quilt patterns. So in fact, I'm going to close this view. You can click on any one of these quilt patterns. Let's try this one. False memories always. Is there more? Turn into reality. Here we go. Your room has no door. You try to pull the blankets over you, but you know that they too will be tossed aside. You try to sleep with your breath quiet, so quiet, but you know he will hear you anyway. All right, so this one's pretty creepy too. So let me X this out and show you some things. So go this way. It's hard to click on these things. So one way of experiencing this work, as you see, is you can click on those images, and those images will come back. But I wanted to show you this too, because if you look at it, these 9 blocks, these 9 passages correspond to each of those 9 quilt squares in the cover image. So it's these that are printed on the package too. And each of these, you can drill into it. So if we wanted to look at, what was it just looking at, interlocked? You can click down into interlocked, and then we kind of zoom into this, and we see the contents of it. So we've got interlocked. It's kind of hard to move your way around it sometimes. And if you ever get lost, you can always go up. Like you can center it like this, or you can go up like this to kind of go up a level. Oh, I accidentally moved it. Or let's take a look at, no, let's see what, I want to get back in here. It's kind of hard to click in the right place sometimes. I'm trying to view into this one. Where's the text? Double click to open text space. Okay. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Interlocked view. So this is, if you remember when I was looking at this in Lust, you could see a list of all of the links that a particular Lexia included, like all the places it would go to. This work also includes the same thing, but there's an interesting thing that Dina Larson has done with these. And that is that she has named the paths, so the actual link, the connection between two things. They each have their own names, but she's given these names that actually read out together as a separate storyline. And I'm going to see if I can view it at the top level. Let me go back here and can I go up one more? Let's see. No, hang on. I'm trying to get to, this is for a coyote who should learn to keep his promises. I'm trying to get to the main page again. Well, this will probably work. So this is kind of hard to explain because it's pretty abstract, right? So each of these is a named link. In fact, let me show you, you can actually view all of the links if you want to. It's really messy. So you can go like this and you can see how everything is connected. Like all of those have names. And what she's done is if you read all these names in order, they actually spell something out. So right here, if we view the links from this particular Lexia, the links names can be read together. So one link is called Instead of a Letter, and it goes to a place called Daily Lives. Another link is called If I Had More Time To, and it goes to Passage. It goes to a passage called Watching. Another one's called Write You, and it goes to Watching as well. But if you just read those titles, you can also read out Instead of a Letter, if I had more time to write you, I would tell you how my students laugh into their hands at my Japanese or my foreignness here in their hills. Foreigners are so seldom seen, I would tell you, here the street lamps replace stars. Here strident calls from markets give way only to the soba man, whose ancient croons now crash from loudspeakers into the thin paper of my fragile walls. I describe the sounds of the kodo mixing fiercely in with the howls of the night trains, the ancient still battling against the new. We would watch the shadows of the monks in the temple gardens, misting into the still burnt odor of the chants and green tea. I would ask you lightly about your aspen mornings and the elk in the garden. I would not tell you what lies at the edge of the dark hills I climb each night to my home. So into this world and see how it turns, ferret out the ways, or return home. So Bobby just raised a good question or a good point actually in the live stream chat channel. Noting that these works do seem more abstract. I think that's a good way to think of it. I think I would also just say more generally that they're more like avant-garde and experimental as literary forms. So these are people trying to create literary fiction. The works that you're used to, like 10 Lost Boys, these are meant to be consumed quickly through the web and almost game-like in their presentation. And I think that's how you would see most modern Twine-based works. But these works were meant to be literary fiction. Like these were meant to be, avant-garde, postmodern writing, and so they do have that characteristic to them. So let's follow this link here. We stared into the fire, nearly touching. The fire grasped the colors of the fox too tightly, forcing them to gather into the stone god. The god stayed small, perhaps a little larger than the fox, no more. But the firefox threw shadows that needed to cover the earth. I join them. The laughter turns on edge. The fire sputters to itself, hiding their whispers. So certainly you can write this kind of work with Twine, and people do. I think some of Porpentine's work is similarly abstract like these are, although there's usually something else going on with Porpentine's work. But Porpentine is a writer who does work in Twine, and often it's pretty bizarre and abstract in the way that it's organized, and the ideas and the images that it creates. Okay, so that's Samplers. Again, the main thing I wanted you to think of with Samplers is I wanted to show you more parts of the story space reader and the different kinds of things you can do with it. You can break out lots of different pieces of it, and it's a pretty complex object to work with as software. All right, so let me show you a couple more things here on the Windows computer. So I'm going to show you, let's see, yeah, I have time. I'll take a sip here. The wind really kicked up too. I wonder if there's a storm coming. It's kind of early in the season for a storm, but oh well. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of hypertext. So Afternoon, a Story by Michael Joyce is probably the most written about hypertext work, and also the first, and really kind of sometimes called the granddaddy of hypertext. I mean, that's what it says on the CD case. And it's it says here, it is to the interactive novel what the Gutenberg Bible is to publishing. So when this work came out, it was really presented as and published as, and people were talking about it as kind of a revolution. Like, this is the new way to write fiction. And newness and novelty is something that I think has kind of plagued electronic literature since then, because things can't always be interesting because they're new. They have to be interesting and valuable because they say something important. I think that's been an ongoing issue with eLit. But this is a work that definitely is worth reading. It's definitely a work that that rewards close reading. I don't have time to give you a full traversal of it, but you can find it on YouTube actually, and I'll link to it if you can't find it. But Michael Joyce has recently recorded some traversals of this work, and so you can hear him reading it and others reading and navigating it, and it's pretty interesting. But this was the first work published by Eastgate Systems, which is the software company, and I believe they actually created StorySpace for the purpose of creating this work, and then others used StorySpace to create their works. So let's take a look at it. I try to recall winter, as if it were yesterday, she says, but I do not signify one way or another. By 5, the sun sets and the afternoon melt freezes again across the blacktop into crystal octopi and palms of ice, rivers and continents beset by fear, and we walk out to the car, the snow moaning beneath our boots and the oaks exploding in series along the fence line on the horizon. I said boats, but that's boots. And the shrapnel settling like relics, the echoing thundering off far ice. This was the essence of wood, these fragments say, and this darkness is air. Poetry, she says, without emotion, one way or another. Do you want to hear about it? So we can type yes or no, actually. We can click yes or no to proceed. There was a question I just saw about what year. This was the 3rd edition, so this particular one was published in 92. Yeah, 92, I think. Well, actually, this particular copy was printed in 2001, but this is the 1992 version of it. Yeah, exactly. But the original was 1987. So the original, let me just type it here to answer Bobby's question, make it. There you go. So let's see. I do want to. There is one quote I'm going to try to get to here, if I can, in Afternoon. It's a novel. It's a very long work. Let's say no. This is what we would get to if we said no. Let's say that. I understand how you feel. Nothing is more empty than heat. Seen so starkly, the world holds wonder only in the expanses of clover where the bees work. There's a lot to say about this work, but I really love Michael Joyce's writing and the way he puts words together. It has a kind of high literary style, honestly. It's something that I originally encountered when I was in high school, and I was searching on AOL for information about James Joyce, the author of Ulysses and Dubliners and Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. And I happened across something by Michael Joyce. They are not related as far as I know, but Michael Joyce is writing hypertext fiction. I was fascinated as a high school student. Went on to work on it in college. My professors had no idea what I was talking about. But they were supportive, and they were like, "This is cool." That's when I kind of expanded my study into electronic literature. But Afternoon, a Story really, I think, holds up in terms of writing. I think the writing is beautiful. It's written in a way that is, it reminds me a little bit of Don DeLillo, but not as harsh and kind of edgy as Don DeLillo. But I really like it. The key question in this work, Afternoon, a Story, is. And I'm trying to get to it, but there is a passage that usually happens earlier on, and I'm trying to look for it. I'm really just clicking randomly, where I can't find it. Well, the main character's name is Wirt, W-E-R-T, and he trying to find it. I can't find it. But there's a passage that usually occurs very early on where he says, I want to say that I may have seen my son die this morning. So he's on his way to work. He sees a car accident. He thinks he recognizes the car. He thinks it's the car of his ex-wife. He thinks his son is with his ex-wife. And so he is wondering as the story progresses and as different thoughts occur to him and as he kind of thinks through this almost in a stream of consciousness kind of way, that perhaps his son is there, perhaps his son is dead. He tries to call his ex-wife, can't get a hold of her. So that question kind of haunts this work of, is his son dead? And whether or not that's true depends on choices you make. And as you saw, as I was clicking through it there, you can make all kinds of choices without realizing you're making choices. And so whether or not you learn that the son has died or not, it's hard to say. It's hard to say either way. Similarly, there's also the question that Wirt may have caused the accidents, and that is also something that is apparently a pretty rare passage to get to, but it's possible to draw that conclusion as well if you make the right series of choices. But as you see, as you're hopefully noticing, I think this gets back to Bobby's observation, the way that these passages are written they're not written in a way where the one necessarily follows the other. So they are written in a way that they're always kind of in the present tense, always kind of true. And I think we're basically following the main character's wandering thoughts. And if you think about how thoughts wander, they don't always follow a linear sequence. And so that's what we experience as we spend some time with this work. Yeah, it's a fascinating work, and I think rightly celebrated and recognized as a seminal work of hypertext fiction. But I do want to take a look at one more in a little bit more detail, and that is using a different system. So speaking of systems, just again, these are all so far StorySpace. StorySpace is the bespoke hypertext platform that when people are talking about first generation hypertext, most of the time they're talking about StorySpace. In some cases, there are a couple interesting works made with HyperCard, like Uncle Buddy's Phantom Funhouse. Pretty sure that was made with HyperCard. I'm suddenly doubting that, but I'm quite confident now that I think of it that was made with HyperCard. I don't have HyperCard. I don't currently have a HyperCard emulator, although I bet it would work on my OS 9. I'll try that later. If I do get it working, I'll demo it on Friday. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, so the other thing is there are other platforms as well for making hypertext. Yes, Afternoon of Story is also StorySpace. In fact, Afternoon of Story was the first StorySpace work created. Bobby. So I can't click over. Yeah, it's hard for me to click back and forth because the VirtualBox emulator that I'm using for this grabs the mouse and I can't get it out of here without clicking something. So yeah, there you go. Anyway, so let's take a look for the last few minutes at one more hypertext work. That is a pretty different one, so I wanted to show it to you. So here it is. Califia. So Califia, here's the jewel case for Califia. Califia has this kind of sparkly, almost like kitschy kind of cover. The word Califia kind of scrawled out there in cursive, pink cursive. And it's a pretty interesting work. So let's take a look. It's very visual, and it does have audio, although I don't think it's working with this emulator. The audio is, rather. I was very pleased to get this emulator running, by the way. I spent most of the day yesterday actually getting this set of emulators running. So I'm very pleased that I was finally able to get Califia. This is a work that I remember vividly and just really enjoying and making, and it clicked in a way that Afternoon kind of never, it took a lot longer for Afternoon to click with me, but Califia I think made a lot more sense early on. It's a visual work, and that's one difference. This is the prologue. Once there was an island called California where dreams came true, come ashore. And whenever you see these footsteps, you can click on those, and then it takes you kind of to the next page. So this is almost like a PowerPoint or Prezi because you have images and then you can click on them. But as you'll see, there's different kinds of clicking and different kinds of images that you can use. So it's much more complicated than what you could do with Prezi or PowerPoint. On the day after my father was buried, I began digging on the hill behind the house in Whitley Heights. The air was hot and the wind was rising. It was dawn, so clear you could see all the way to Catalina. I started at the south end of the terrace and walked in a straight line across the grass, through the flower bed, out of the sun, and into the filtered shade beneath the eucalyptus trees. So far, so good. At a boulder marked with fading red paint, I began to dig. All I needed was to find the gold coins hidden away for such an emergency as this. Follow me. Fellow searchers, so begins Augusta's journey to find the treasury of Califia. you are invited to join us. Oh yeah, and I just saw on Twitch, Ludo Scholar is mentioning, I don't know who you are, but thank you for watching. And for sharing the traversal of her work. Yeah, so MD Coverly is Marjorie Lucerbrink, and I agree, she is lovely. So thank you for that, whoever you are, Ludo Scholar. But yeah, she's great. She's been very supportive of people coming through the field. I've had the pleasure of meeting her a few times. So yeah, she's definitely cool. And I am also really pleased that I got this work working. I've tried in the past unsuccessfully to get this work working, like to get it on a contemporary computer, but for whatever reason I couldn't get it to go. Part of it is like for VirtualBox, you have to work. I had to work pretty hard to get the graphics to actually work on VirtualBox, but I did yesterday, like I said, and I was very pleased to. I think one of the reasons that this work comes together really nicely compared to Afternoon is that it immediately grounds what you're doing, whereas for Afternoon it takes some time. It kind of has to accumulate a sense of who you are, or who your characters are, how they relate to each other, what their interests are. And you can get that eventually, kind of like with 12 Blue, like I was saying. But for Califia, you're kind of presented with it almost as it's not quite a game, but you are presented with a scenario and a set of, like a task. Like you're going on a quest, and there's this kind of navigational structure built to it. So it's like, we can move left and right. We have a compass rose, so we can move compass directions. It's not quite as granular as interactive fiction, but it still has a sense of exploration. And what you find as you start to put things together is that we're experiencing the story of California, but it's kind of like a mythological California called Califia. And there is kind of a MacGuffin. There's sort of the question of this treasure and different generations of a family trying to find this treasure, or burying the treasure, or dealing with each other. And it's I don't know, it's just a fascinating work. So you have different tools you can pop in and out. Let's see if sometimes this one does not work, but yeah, looks like maybe this is the, yeah, no. Sometimes you can get little pop-outs that have more information. Yeah, there it goes. So yeah, so you find different documents, and you can review all these documents to try to make sense of them as you kind of work your way through it. It sometimes looks like a web page, and so you can kind of click through it and scroll through it as a web page. And it's a fascinating way of presenting hypertext that's much richer, but also kind of ad hoc compared to Storyspace, where Storyspace gives you a set of tools and you can choose to use them or not. As far as I understand, MD Coverly must have designed all of this, or much of it herself. So this, like as far as this particular set of things to click on and look at, these kinds of buttons, I don't remember the name of the system that she used to make this, and it's a system that I don't think I've ever seen anything else made in. So it was one of those kind of things. But it certainly looks like, in some ways, looks like what you can do with HyperCard, but it's certainly more colorful than HyperCard is naturally. I'm just checking to see if there's any. There's a help file. Surely it's explained somewhere in here, but yeah, it's just it's a beautiful work. Anyway, so it's about 12:10, so I do need to wrap it up. I wish I could give you this. I wish I could give you students in my class an opportunity to play with this and explore it yourself, because I think, me just kind of clicking around in it doesn't really give you a sense of these works actually in terms of their themes and content. And you really need to immerse yourself in this kind of work to experience it and to appreciate it. Unfortunately, of course, being socially distanced, it's going to be pretty hard to do this. It would be nice, and it is possible. I do have the capability to set up. I could set up a computer for you to play these on, but it is just logistically impractical. Just because of the cleaning necessity, and then needing to leave it somewhere where you have access to, but it's secure. It's just too much to deal with. So I'm only going to be able to do these kinds of demos for these works. But if you really are interested in them, it's like Ludo Scholar just linked on the Twitch chat, there are traversals of these works. So these authors, like MD Coverly, like Michael Joyce, the work of some people in the Electronic Literature Organization has some people have been doing archival work, essentially preservation work. And one way it has been argued to preserve these is not just to make a copy of the code, but to record people's experiences of it, because that's the real content of the work, is the decisions you make and the things that you do with it. And so, as a YouTube channel, I'll find the YouTube channel and share it later. But it's on that YouTube channel you can find several traversals, including MD Coverly's. And so thank you for sharing that. I'm going to check out this link, actually, that Ludo Scholar. I feel like your name is familiar, Ludo Scholar. I'm sure you're somebody I know, but I can't think of who you are. So yeah, great. Thank you for sharing this. Yeah, this is good. I'm just let me pull it over here so I can pull it up on the view here so you can see this. Which Chrome window is it? Here it is. Too many Chrome windows. Okay, yeah. So this is still hidden. There it is. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so this is the so Scalar is a content management system essentially that lets you publish things in richly linked and interestingly hypertextual ways. Actually, so Scalar is the platform publishing this particular traversal, which is the main bit of it is looks like this video of her reading it. So that's her. That's MD cover.
Okay, I am beginning.
Yeah, or Marjorie Lucerbrink. Excellent. Cool. So these are great resources too when we don't have access to the work itself to actually explore. So I'll make sure to fill these out. Yeah. So Bobby, I'll share the slideshow in a minute if you want. I'll just share the slideshow for you. And all of them are story space except for Califia. The one I was most recently looking at, that one is in its own system, which I can't think of the name of. Here's the slideshow. There you go. So, wait. Nope, that's the wrong link. Oh, it is. No, it is. It's the right link. Okay. It just said the word traverse limit, so I was afraid I was showing this other thing. Okay, so it's 12:10, or it's after 12:10, so I need to wrap it up. Thanks for watching, everybody, and for whoever is not in the class that was watching, thanks for watching. Let's see, Wednesday, this is an even week, so I'll be seeing the even cohort in person on Wednesday, and then, we'll be on Zoom on Friday. And I think on Friday what I will do is I might spend a little bit more time with Afternoon A Story, but I will definitely spend some time with Patchwork Girl, which I don't have my copy of. I don't know where to put it. But Patchwork Girl is a longer work by Shelley Jackson, and you've been reading her work, My Body of Wonder Camera, which we can talk about on Wednesday. But then on Friday, I will demo and show and do a traversal of Patchwork Girl on Zoom, probably. And maybe also Afternoon. I think, when we look at early hypertext, like moving from first to second generation, I think it is pretty interesting to look at Michael Joyce and Shelley Jackson's work together. I mean, they're the two most visible authors in that period. So it's kind of helpful to look at some of the work that's on the web and then look at some that's in these custom systems like Storyspace. Yeah, again, just, the final, I guess, advice about 12 Blue, be patient with it. Like, it's not nonsensical. It might be confusing, but being disoriented is not the end of your experience, right? Like, it's something that you can make sense of and that I can explain if we need to, but I want you to experience on your own and try to make sense of. And I think it will definitely help to add character notes to the Google Doc and possibly a kind of family tree structure. And then, then that should be helpful. But again, see if you can figure out who killed Ed Stenko. All right, so I'll wrap that up. I would switch on the bird cam, but there's a bird there. Wait, maybe, let me just switch to the bird cam really quick and see if it looks anything. Oh, it does look decent. Nice. Okay, so I'll leave you with this cardinal, and I'll see you all some of you on Wednesday in person, and the rest of you on Zoom on Wednesday. So take care. Have a good day.